Hey guys, I promise this is gonna be the last world looping video this league, I think. And I wanted to make a final update of this build. I did attempt some Uber bosses, but the visual clarity of this build was, let's just say, not very good. And other than that, I have never even tried Uber bosses. I saw some people doing it, but not as a guide. So I wasn't even expecting it to be able to do. And yeah, I did try only a couple Uber bosses and it didn't really go very well with this build. Just like I predicted, this build is tanky for everything except Uber bosses. It can pretty much ignore all the game mechanics, face tank everything pretty much, and pretty much everything else just doesn't matter. You just walk over all the enemies. I also tested multiple other skills. The strongest skill is still obviously Ice Spear with the freezing pulse, and I know that this is still meta build, so I wanted to do something a little less meta and experiment with different skills, but this is my favorite build of all times probably. I have never played that long, and I for the first time ever reached level 95, and min-maxed the build quite a bit. It's not like fully min-maxed, you can still improve more, because that's the reason why I still want to play this build, because I can still improve it, but I don't see much reason to do that, because I won't be able to do Uber bosses unless I practice them, and that takes a lot of time, and yeah, I don't really feel like doing that. And other than bosses, it already does everything. Like, you go to map boss, it's just 1 second map boss dead. You go to Conquerors, instant phase. You go to Cirrus, well, Cirrus is also a bit harder to see what's happening, the Degen ground and the other shenanigans, but other than that, like, everything is just amazing with this build. There is like one monster that absolutely just stops the build. Temporal bubble or temporal shield monsters, because they screw up with the cooldown recovery rate and it stops the build. Like, I personally did not invest that much. I think I invested like 10-15 exalts, but I did craft some really nice items that each would cost like 10 exalts maybe. So overall this build is currently like 50 exalts, 40 exalts maybe, which is like really high budget for me. And I did manage to upgrade quite a few items, and in the end I decided to not go for the next cooldown recovery breakpoint and just went with the most basic, how should I say this, the most basic cooldown required for this to work. Because if I went with the next breakpoint, I would only gain 16% more damage. By the way, I have no idea how much DPS I have, but it definitely feels more than 10 million. I did try to calculate, because Path of Building does not calculate the DPS properly, the full DPS, because it still is based on the cast rate, which is irrelevant for this build. You are proccing 4.33 times per second. You just have to multiply all the spells that you have, all the average hit damage by that number. So the build has like 10 million DPS maybe, but it feels so consistent, and you don't really have like big conditional stuff. If you are hitting enemies, you have all the conditions met pretty much. So you don't need to worry about anything. You just walk over everything. You don't need to worry about regen. You don't need to worry about hitting flask. Just go in, pick up the loot, go out basically. Now, I'm not gonna go into details how everything works, because I already made 2 videos. So in this video I just want to make an update to this build. First, the amulet. I actually made this amulet myself. Just get +1 to all skill gems with the crit multi. If possible, hit the life and then use the jargon in research at rank 2. It has to be at rank 2. And turn the amulet into talisman and hope that you hit increased global defense, because increased global defense does increase the ward, and then later you can anoint that. You can also hit another crit multiplier implicit. There's also increased percentage life. So there are a couple good tier 2 talisman implicits that can work, but global defense obviously makes you tankier, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to be tankier. The helmet I actually also recrafted and made it better. Previously I had like below 700 ward, and this one is 744 ward. I'm not sure how much this helmet would cost, but it's also an improvement by like 100 ward from previous. Boots also improved a bit, not that much, but only by a tiny bit more ward, but these boots can also have more movement speed, and onslaught, which also gives more movement speed. So for clear speed this feels great. Unfortunately I tried doing the Uber lab for the boots enchantments for 18% reduced mana cost, because you kind of need that. Depends on which skills you use. Some skills may drain too much mana, and it's just unpleasant when you begin the loop. Like, look at this. When I start the loop, the mana gets drained quite a bit. And I am using free spells as a main link, and then Forbidden Rite, and I tried different variations, and some spells can just drain too much mana, so you would probably want to reduce mana cost. one of the flasks also needs to have that. The gloves I did not change. I tried getting better gloves, but it's like I already have pretty high ward gloves. I actually crafted a bit better gloves with a bit more ward but a bit less resistance, so it's not really worth changing. I did switch from Mana Bond into Arc. Arc feels great for clearing. Although Arc is not as fast if you run into massive enemy packs, because it's based on how many arcs you can chain per second essentially, so you don't hit all the enemies at the same time. So it's a bit slower, but it feels great because it hits enemies from far away. It's pretty much instant. I also switched gloves exposure from fire into lighting because I am using currently Blazing Salvo and the Firestorm, and I have Awakened Fire Penetration, which turns into level 5, which does give exposure, and the gem does give 10% chance to apply fire exposure. But since I'm casting 2 fire skills which hit multiple times, I can very easily apply fire exposure, but for lighting exposure, which is needed for arc, it's better to have like guaranteed exposure, so I switched that on gloves and added lighting exposure on gloves instead of fire exposure. The arc also has Awakened Lighting Penetration level 5, which does apply exposure, but 10% chance to apply exposure just felt like not instant enough. Not really a big deal. Arc doesn't really add all that much DPS against single target, but I tried also switching and using Volatile Dead, but Desecrate just kills FPS, so I had to use the MTX to kind of increase my FPS. But it just feels nice, but also visual clarity is just forget about visual clarity. I tried doing series with the Volatile Dead. I can't really tell if the damage is better or not. Pretty much anything you're gonna use with the Ward Loop is gonna feel great, and if you use Ice Spear, which is the most meta skill, then it's gonna feel even better, I guess. But I wanted to keep ability to apply Scorch and Sap. Sap makes enemies do less damage to me, and Scorch makes them lose resistances up to 30%. So it's pretty big deal as Elementalist. You apply exposure, that's minus 11 resistance. Then because you are Elementalist, you apply an extra minus 20, so that's minus 33. And then the Scorch, another minus 30, so that's minus 63% elemental resistances for enemies. So that's pretty massive. I also removed the cast and damage taken RF Winter. It's not really necessary. The Frostbolt is just hardest hitting spell to apply Brittle, but I wasn't getting 15% Brittle against like the Uber bosses obviously, or Sirius I believe was getting like 12% or something like that. For the passive skill tier, I tried a couple things, but I had to refund a bit of life because I was taking too much damage. Like balancing life and the amount of HS resistance is kind of annoying a bit, and my resistances are barely kept for fire and cold res. I cannot really get this one because then I have too much HS res, and then I don't do enough damage to myself to continue the loop. I could get like 10-12 HS res, but right now I don't have the room for that. I could like swap my resistances on one of the items, like transfer from lighting into fire, and then one of the firecraft as a hybrid, like lighting plus HS res, and maybe it would be enough, because the more damage you take, the less HS resistance you have, the more damage you take, the more your life is gonna start jumping, and the more mana problems you're gonna have until you get a recube happening. And like I said, I did not go for the next cooldown recovery rate breakpoint. I would actually lose or empty one jewel socket, so I would gain one jewel socket, but then I would have to take these nodes here. I would have to also link the summon skeletons with the less duration to match the rate, and then I couldn't have Frostball here, so I would have to sacrifice a couple of things, and probably to gain those couple of passive points I would have to lose something else here. So essentially I would probably have to lose some damage here just to be able to get damage through the proc rate, which would also increase the performance problems. So is it really worth it going for the next breakpoint? I'm not sure. I don't really think that it is worth it. The damage is just plenty anyway, and if you want more damage, just use Ice Spear, I guess. That pretty much covers the update. I don't know what next build I should do. If you got some interesting ideas, let me know in the comments below. I'm not even sure what I want to do for the next build. It's either have to be a meme build, or it has to be a build that can pretty much face tank uber bosses. Tanky builds are boring if you don't have enough damage, so could I do a tanky build that also has like 3 million DPS, maybe? So if you got some ideas, let me know in the comments below. So for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.